Hello and welcome to Cutting Down the Net Sunday edition, where we actually have a little bit of a new format today that I'm looking forward to, and hopefully you see value in. I'm trying to add a little more value to this program, and I'm excited about some of the changes I'm bringing in. Little recap of yesterday. Gosh, we're close. We're just getting over the hump. We finished 6-4, which brought our ATS up. I'm expecting that to keep climbing, but time will tell as to how quickly it climbs. So 6-4, we had some bad beats and we had some bad bets, but pendulum swings one way, it swings the other. Notre Dame had no business not covering that game, and West Virginia probably had no business covering their game. So win some, you lose some, you move on. The game that I want to focus on that lit my bankroll on fire despite how many games I won was Austin Peay at home against Eastern Illinois. So I want to walk through my thought process and show you kind of the risks involved with these bets. So what I'm going to bring up is a distribution model of that game. So this is Austin Peay as the home team. And that first black line on the left is what the point spread was at, which ultimately ended up at 6.5 because sharp people had bet it down, apparently, and the fish, like me, got suckered into it. Then the right line is the game outcome. So this distribution model is showing how I mashed up those two teams using their efficiencies, the average of those, the standard deviation of those, and I had them play the game 10,000 times. This is what the distribution model looked like. So anything left of that first left line is favorable outcomes if you're betting Austin Peay. So if they play this game 10,000 times, I think 6,000 of those data points fall to the left, which would be an Austin Peay cover. That still leaves a lot of opportunity of losing that bet. But this is a probability game. This is why we gamble. It's not like it's a binary, it's a 100% chance or it's 0% chance. So I think it's helpful to see that and understand that I stick by the process. I think it was the right play. It did not work out. And now that second black line, you can see where that falls in the range of outcomes. Like what percentile of an outcome was that to not only not cover, but how much it falls off to actually have Eastern Illinois win by a couple points. So it's frustrating, but do know that, what's the range of outcomes for a game? If they played it 100 times or 1,000 or 10,000, it doesn't really matter. In those range of outcomes is Austin Peay losing. And boy, they showed that yesterday. Frustrating performance. Few thoughts. I actually did pretty well yesterday, better than the 6-4 of recommended plays, because I dipped into some areas of the card that I would not recommend, but I'm going to let you guys make those decisions for yourself. So I'll walk through the biggest variances in the model unfiltered. And I'll go step by step and explain why there's risk in that bet and whether I'd recommend it or not. So, without further ado, let's bring up the biggest discrepancies between my data and the Vegas line. Game number 1, UNLV San Jose State. So why bet this game? There is a difference of nearly 8 points. Why not bet this game? They played 2 days ago. San Jose State is awful. I do think they covered about 90% of the game the first time around. So I'm sharing this with you for all these games so that you can decide if you want to take on that risk. And then at the end, I'll give you what my true recommended plays are. Like, okay, filtering out what I consider to be risky situations, this is where I ended up. So first game, UNLV, the risk involved we've talked about. Next up, Wagner. We have a big discrepancy there. This is a back-to-back. They played yesterday. Wagner blew them out. As kind kind of the data suspected. Can they do it 2 times in a row? That's the question. I don't know. Little Rock UL Monroe is game number 3. You can see that I have UL Monroe by 2 points, but they're getting 4 in this situation. These are 2 bad teams, but that is something that I think is worth taking a look. BU is at Colgate for a back-to-back. Boy, did I have the fishiest line ever. Locking in a 14.5 on a game that goes down to like 12 is just one of the most frustrating things to see, and then doubling down on that is a way to make mistakes. But we move on. So Colgate is, after putting in last night's box score, they're now a 17-point favorite with my data, where I think yesterday it was around a 19, 20, something like that. So this is accounting for that game. Risks involved, I mean, they're playing with masks on. It's a back-to-back. It's Colgate, man. They've now played BU 3 times. They have beat them by 10, 7, and 45, and you've got an 11-point line. And they're at home. Like, I get it if you do not want to bet Colgate, but make your own decisions. Next up, George Washington is at home against Rhode Island. Rhode Island favored by 9.5. But George Washington, I have coming within 4. However, George Washington has not played in, I think, a month. And typically that's affecting numbers by 2, 3, 4 points. So you add that to it, and it's getting tighter. I still think there's some value in George Washington, but know the risks involved coming off the COVID pause. Next up, NC A&T at Florida A&M. This was a play I did not recommend yesterday, but I ended up playing because these teams were fresh off a COVID break themselves. I played a little bit on it. Florida A&M covered. We are now back to the same situation, and do with it what you will. So it's a back-to-back. Know the risks. South Florida at Temple. I have Temple by 3.5. They're actually getting a point at home. So this is not a back-to-back. These are fresh teams. I am going to have a play on Temple, as you'll see soon. Oral Roberts at South Dakota. South Dakota is someone that was very strong in my data and just keeps fading. They're coming off a back-to-back. South Dakota won by 2 yesterday. Take that with what you will. Cincinnati at Houston. This is likely a grinding pace. This is a lot of points, especially for a conference game with familiar opponents. Cincy has only played once or twice since taking a long break themselves. I have it at 17. The line's 13. Take that with what you will. Navy at American. I have this game much closer, but yesterday American played their 5th game of the season. Yes, 5th game of the season. So on February 21st, I would want more data to make a decision, but based on how little those 2 teams have played, I do have that closer. Valpo, Southern Illinois. We have Southern Illinois favored by 1, and I have Valpo as a slight favorite. So the reason I'm sharing this is I don't think it is wise to recommend like 25 games a day. Like, no one wants to play a card that big, but I think filtering it kind of shortchanges you. You can see what I see. You can make your own decisions instead of me making those decisions for you. At the end of this, I'll still have recommendations about what I like and why I like it and the games that I feel have the least amount of risk. And I wish you luck. So the next thing I'm doing to switch up this show, I want to highlight the marquee games. There is, it's kind of rare for a marquee game to be off on the point spread by a whole lot. They show up from time to time. We can get some bigger schools, but I want to highlight those games so that if you're playing them, because here's the deal, no one wants to sweat out a Colgate bet on a scoring app. It gets kind of frustrating. So I'm going to highlight some of the bigger games of the day, and whether or not they're plays or not, you can decide. I'll show you what data I have for those, and if there's maybe some leans in there that may help with the decision-making process. So let's highlight some of those for Sunday. We have a few Big Ten games in here. And the first is the game of the day. It's Michigan at Ohio State. I think there was a situation where Michigan was getting points. Now Ohio State's getting points. I had this close to a pick'em. Ohio State by about a half point. So now Ohio State is getting points. I mean, it's close. But if you're going to watch that game, want to bet it, that's where I stand on it. Butler Xavier seems like a big line when you first look at it, but I actually have Xavier by 10.5. So remember, as you're looking at these lines, these are the home team lines. That's why sometimes you see a minus, sometimes you see a plus. Wisconsin at just Northwestern. Just Northwestern is a 4-point underdog, or a 6-point underdog, and I have them closer to a 4. So that's a line where I think it will go up throughout the day. It's one of the last games of the day. So maybe grabbing some like Northwestern plus 7 late in the day makes sense if you feel like betting Northwestern. Penn State, Iowa, we've got a double-digit favorite here. I have Iowa by 13.5 roughly. That line sits at 11. Maryland, Rutgers, I had real close. I think it opened at 4, and now it's gone up to 4.5, but that's kind of a wash for me, and I can't imagine a scenario where I bet that game. So the reason I want to share this is we've got some big games every day, and they're certainly more fun than betting some of the smaller ones. And it's also good to see where the data is as line moves. So at what point does a game become valuable? Like if Michigan gains a lot of steam and all of a sudden Ohio State's 2.5-point dogs, that becomes a pretty strong play in my opinion. So factoring in everything I have discussed, here are the 2 games I'm recommending today. I'm going to take UL Monroe and the 4 points. I have them favored. I'd play anything to pick them or better, and going to be on the Warhawks. Next game, I will also take the point for Temple at home. They have South Florida coming to town. These are 2 teams that are pretty average, but not necessarily teams that can go on big runs. So I expect this game to be pretty close, but I think I like that Temple +1 because I think there's a little bit of value there. So again, you can see everything I see. That's ultimately how I filter this down. So my basic process is I run a computer program that goes through the whole schedule. Today I think there's 37 games, give or take. Then I get down to like which ones have a difference of 3 or more points. And then I try to find reasons not to bet that game. It's basically what I do. And if I can't find enough reasons, I bet the game. Sometimes I find a lot of reasons and still bet the game. But I think this will allow you to make more decisions and then highlight some of those bigger games as well. So expect that moving forward. I think it will be fun. And I appreciate you stopping by, cutting down the nets. Let's cash some bets.